Going. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Today is November 6th, and you have joined us for the COVID-resistant, recession-resistant franchise ownership opportunities webinar sponsored by the U.S. Small Business Administration's Nebraska District Office. And my co-host today, Elizabeth Yearwood, thank you very much for putting this together and for sponsoring the session through SBA of Nebraska. My name is Blake Martin, and I am, as you can see on the screen here, one of my bullet points is a volunteer with SCORE in the SBA. So SBA is the Small Business Administration, and SCORE is the free mentoring and coaching component of the SBA. So we are a group of retirees and aspiring retirees around the entire metropolitan area who offer coaching and mentoring to folks who are either looking to start a business and or looking to grow a business. We are affiliated with the SBA, who's sponsoring the session today. So yes, we are recording, and we will both post a link to the recording and send a link to the email address that you all used when you registered. So I'm Blake Martin. I'll be doing the first set of slides here, and then we'll follow with Elizabeth, and we will cover the questions that you put into the chat today as we go. This is me, as I was saying earlier, pre-COVID, I guess, less gray hair, no corona goatee, etc. I'm a local franchise owner, and that's why they asked me to present on these sessions, because I'm in the shoes of folks who are thinking about getting into the franchising world. And prior to that, I built franchise systems. I worked on the corporate side of franchising and helping to grow franchise systems. So I've seen that side of the table as well. I volunteer with SCORE, and also, of course, this is a session that's all about upcoming Veterans Week and Veterans Month and Veterans Day next week. And so I'm part of the Transition Assistance Program Presenters and Boots to Business at Offutt Air Force Base. In the chat box, please let us know, are there any veterans or active duty on the call or spouses of veterans or active duty? I'd like to know the audience that we're speaking to, and anybody on who has looked at a franchise before. Would appreciate knowing that. And Elizabeth, you can just let me know if we get a tally on that. So our first quote of the day: these are the times when fortunes are made. The quote, you see several different variations of that quote over the years. If you Google it on Warren Buffett, a guy who's had a little bit more success in business than I've had before. It's been a while since I invited him to lunch, but I've heard him say this before. And of course, there's meaning to that, right? During times when most people look the other way as pertains to business opportunities, some, typically a minority of folks, will look at this as a moment of opportunity. So we're here to talk about three different ways to leverage opportunity, three different options or avenues through which you can get into business. You can build, you can buy, or you can join. Those are really the three big picture options when it comes to how to enter into small business ownership. Building is what, statistically speaking, most people do, right? They start their own business from the ground up. Buy is buying an existing business. You go to Biz, Buy, Sell, you go to a local business broker, whatever it may be, but you look at listings of existing businesses for sale. And then join, where we're going to spend most of our conversation, join an existing franchise system, which, as we'll talk about, is kind of a hybrid of those first two in many ways. Elizabeth, any responses yet to the question of anybody who's researched franchises themselves before?
Yes, sorry, it takes me a minute to find where the mute button is. Oh, sorry about the phone. Okay, anyway, sorry about that. Yes, we do have one person that is researching a franchise currently. That's Kelly Morris. And then we also have Corey, who is currently working for a franchise. And we also have 3 veterans on the phone too. So thank you for your service, everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely. And great to know that we have that perspective. we certainly won't obligate anybody to provide feedback, but I want to remind you all that you can unmute yourself during this call, as long as there's not a dog barking in the background. And please, we would love to have more of an interactive session where we're fielding your questions and getting contributions from others who are engaged in the process and or have their own experiences that are going to be relevant to what we're talking about.
Oh, and Blake, Corey is also researching franchises.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. So back to the previous slide. As we said before, there's three different ways, really, if you break it down into its most fundamental components, three different ways that you can get into business on your own. You can build your own thing, you can buy an existing business, or you can join a franchise. So I'm a local small business franchise owner myself, and I'll be the first one to say that that doesn't mean that any of these, including joining a franchise, is more right or wrong. What it's really about is educating yourself on the three options and figuring out which one is the right option for you. And we have found at the SBA and SCORE that this is a subject that we typically get the most or a lot of questions on. What does franchising really look like? What is it all about? And so if we do nothing else and to educate you on what franchise opportunities are, and you can do a better job of weighing which of the three avenues you'll go down, great, we've achieved our goal today. At the end of the day, joining a franchise system, what that provides you is an ongoing license to use name and trademarks, products, and business systems. So let's take a local franchise that we all know, Runza, right? So if you join Runza as a franchise owner in the local marketplace, somewhere around Nebraska or the surrounding states, what you get when you join that franchise system is the brand value, the ongoing right to use, a license to use their name and trademarks, the Runza sign, all the trademarks that go along with that, and the value that that brings, the acknowledgement that that brings in the local community where you're running your Runza business. Also, the products, right? You're going to be able to get the burgers, the fries, the Runzas, the salads, obviously at a discounted rate, and you're going to be able to get the quality that people expect from Runza and the consistent taste and standard. So the products. That also, of course, overlays into business systems, which is the least talked about, but the most important of those three, in my opinion, being a franchise owner myself. Business systems are all about, how do I do this thing the right way? Show me how to learn from your failures and successes as an organization, the things that previous franchise owners did right and did wrong, so that I can do better, faster than I would otherwise do on my own. Let me learn from the things that have happened in the system before, implement the tools, whether that's the software, whether that's the marketing system, whether that's the recruitment systems. Show me how to do this the right way, specific to this industry and specific to this organization, so I can get to break even sooner and build a more profitable business. That's, to me, at the end of the day, the value that a franchise should bring to the table for you. In exchange for that, this isn't free, right? There's going to be two investments that you have to make to join any franchise system. The first is an initial franchise fee. These range and vary, but it's going to be a one-time investment that you're making to have unlimited access to all of the name and trademarks, products, and business systems. You're going to sign a franchise agreement with them that stipulates the extent of your use of those things and what they are obligated to provide to you and what they're not obligated to provide to you. The other investment is ongoing royalties. So I'm a franchise owner with FranNet, right? My national office is based out of Louisville, Kentucky. Every time I sell $100 worth of stuff, I get 95 bucks in my pocket and they get about $5, 5% royalty. Please tell me, either through the chat or by unmuting yourself, what is 5% of $0? Yeah, I know you didn't know there's going to be math on today's call. Of course, 5% of 0 is 0. Any percent of 0 is 0. So the point being, what made me comfortable about going the franchise route was the only way they're going to make money is if I make money. And after I did some research, I said, yeah, okay, they charged me, $30,000 for an initial franchise fee. But as I looked at the value of all the things they could bring to the table for me, short-term and long-term, there's no way I could build and maintain all this stuff for far more than that. So it made sense to me that I was going to join a franchise system versus just trying to start things up on my own. So advantages and disadvantages. Again, we are not here to tell you that any form of entry into business ownership is more right or more wrong. It's your decision to make. And we would argue that there are advantages and disadvantages when you compare franchising to building or buying an existing business. Advantages on the left side of the screen, yep, that same stuff we talked about, business systems, et cetera, training and support, lower failure rate than starting on your own. The bottom four are ones that people don't often think of, but are incredibly important as far as advantages of franchises. First, financing options. Banks like to lend to franchises. Why is that? I'm going to make somebody unmute and answer that question, okay? Somebody's going to put themselves on the spot. Why do banks, why do lenders tend
Because
to
they feel like the loan's more secure because of the training and support of the organization.
Exactly. There's a track record, right? There's training, there's support, there's infrastructure already. Lenders are risk averse by nature. They have to be. The government regulators that oversee the banks have certain expectations of them. And what they like to see is that there's a proven track record. That's the case both with buying an existing business or investing in a franchise. So both of those options have a leg up over building your own thing when it comes to ease of obtaining lending for a new business. That's particularly important right now, which Elizabeth's going to get into a little bit at the end of the slides. Semi-absentee. So good franchise systems are really good at building systems, processes, and tools. And in many cases, what those systems, processes, and tools allow you to do is to be able to run that business either right from the beginning or shortly thereafter, or whenever you make the decision. You can be an owner who is not a full-time operator. You can bring in the resources, tools, and management skills and leadership so that somebody else is running the day-to-day of the business and you're involved on a semi-passive basis in the business. Franchising tends to do this very well in a lot of industries, not in all. And that can be one of the advantages for somebody that's looking to get more into an investment where they want to keep their full-time job, or they want to keep other business interests going and contribute time to those in addition to this new business. Now, as a franchise owner myself, that doesn't mean that you're not going to work your butt off in the beginning. You will absolutely work your butt off to get any new business going, franchise or not. But it does mean that there may be a different kind of light at the end of the tunnel sooner rather than later. And so that's attractive to a lot of folks. You need to be comfortable with the idea of giving up some control to others who will run the day-to-day in order for a semi-passive concept to work for you, by the way. Disclosure. This was my favorite part of going through the process of considering and researching franchise opportunities. When I had narrowed it down and decided the one franchise that I wanted to look at the most was FranNet, what I had in my hands and what every franchise or whatever franchise system is required to provide to you as a qualified candidate is a disclosure document. And one of the things that disclosure document has in it is a listing with contact information for all the current and former franchise owners within their system. So I was able to call as many, if I had wanted to, I could have called all of the existing franchise owners who were already doing what I was thinking about doing. And I asked them questions after building a little rapport. I asked them questions like, hey, so you've been at this for a year or 5 years or 10 years, whoever I was talking to. If you had it to do over again, would you? And would you mind sharing with me, how long did it take you to get to break even? How much money are you taking out of this business? What are the biggest challenges with the business? Are there things that their franchisor could do better that I should be aware of? You know, no franchisor is strong at everything. And so what that allowed me to really get a very good handle on was this going to be a good fit for me? And did I see myself looking a lot more like the really successful franchise owners in the system, or more like those that had left the system and hadn't succeeded, or were lower performers in the system based upon my own perception and research? That was valuable to me. And that was the deal breaker for me that, hey, if I was going to do anything, I was going to do franchising. And a franchise family. For those folks who very much enjoy the idea of being part of something that's bigger than them, being able to learn from other peers, compare notes and best practices with other peers. Franchising, if you find the right system for yourself, can be very rewarding beyond the financial gains that you might get from it. Disadvantages. Well, first of all, if you're going to research franchising the right way, there is no shortage of research and information and content that you're going to have to digest and evaluate. So I would tell you, you better plan on it feeling like you've got a part-time job for the next 3 to 6 months when you're researching and comparing and contrasting different opportunities within the franchising field. If you're not willing to put that kind of time into it, then you're really not going to gain the advantages that you would normally gain from researching a franchise versus just building your own thing or buying an existing business. So you've got to be okay with that kind of time dedication. Structured operating systems. Now, that might be an upside for some, but for others, they might say, okay, there are guide rails here, right? I've got to work within these guide rails. I've got to work within the brand guidelines. And as you're learning about it, get a clear understanding of what those guidelines are. And if you get to the point where you feel like, boy, I can't be comfortable with that, with me having to defer to their decisions on these things, then maybe that particular franchise or no franchise at all is right for you. If you find yourself feeling more and more comfortable and confident with the idea that, hey, these guys have these guide rails up here and they're going to help me predict where I might otherwise go wrong on my own, then maybe what you're learning is this franchising gig might be the right thing for me to be looking at if I go into business for myself. Territory restrictions, right? So if you, again, let's stay with the Runza example. If you want to start a Runza in the Omaha area, you're probably out of luck right now. If you want to start one in Ainsworth, I think they've got a viable opportunity there. You might have to move there to do that. Now, not every franchise opportunity out there is as well built out as a Runza. So it might be that the whole state of Nebraska or Iowa or whatever is wide open for you and you can pick and choose. But that's not always the case. And they will often have a protected, limited territory and say, what you get are these zip codes or these counties. And you can't actively go out and market for business outside of those geographic areas. So make sure that you're comfortable with, if that's the case within that franchise system, and they do have an exclusive franchise territory that they're designating to you, you're comfortable that you could build a thriving business long-term within that geographic area, and why it is that they have designated that particular area. In some franchise systems, like fitness concepts and food concepts, they'll have a very relatively small, restricted, exclusive territory. Like it'll be a few square miles within a lot of the food concepts, like a Scooters or a Runza. We won't open up another location, company owned or another franchisee, within 2 square miles or 5 square miles of where you're going to build your location. FranNet, they said to me, okay, Blake, you get all of Nebraska and Western Iowa. Very different business models, each of which made sense within both different business systems. But you, as the potential buyer of that business system, have to be okay with the why and the what, that territory restriction. You have to be willing to sell their products and or services. So, if you join Runza, they're probably not going to let you sell pizza out of your drive-through window, right? And they're certainly not going to let you do oil changes for people outside of their window. So you got to get comfortable with that. Ongoing royalty payments. Some people, like me, say, hey, I know that 5% that I'm giving them out of every $100 that I earn, I'm good with that because I'd probably pay more to a third-party advisor or whatever. Other people would say, I don't want to share anything. If you don't want to share anything, then franchising is probably not right for you. Probably want to look at the build or buy options instead.
Hey, Blake, we do have a quick question.
Perfect, because that's exactly what I was about to ask you for. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Cool. Great minds think alike, right? So Kristen is wondering if you have any particular thoughts about Smoothie King.
Can she be more specific? I'll ask as a follow-up question, but I'll start answering that as she thinks of the follow-up question. So I don't have any particular thoughts about Smoothie King itself because I haven't researched it extensively recently. But what I can help you with is the industry in general. It's an industry that I've worked with. Let me just admit somebody here. And what I would tell you is that's a concept where you can gain advantages that people often see within the food and beverage field, meaning everybody needs to eat, right? And there's a relatively strong opportunity that there will be a market for it because it's a proven category. And you're able to obtain that with typically a much smaller investment that you would have in a full service food and beverage business like a Runza. So it might be 1/10 the investment, for example. If you're investing in a Runza, it's probably about $1 million investment. Something like a Smoothie King is likely to be a fraction of that. What you want to research and be comfortable with, and if you get to the stage of talking to other local franchise owners who are already in Smoothie King, I would encourage you to ask questions like, how does it work in a cold weather state like Nebraska? How do you ensure that you can keep some continuity in staff recruitment and retention if it is more of a seasonal opportunity in a market like this? And if you get if you get answers that you're comfortable with those questions, then I would encourage you to continue your research.
And Kristen's wondering too, where would you start with that? So I know you had great info there about starting by asking questions and doing research, but then where do you go? What's your next step when you kind of decide?
So there's typically several steps or phases in the process when you're researching franchise opportunities. So the first is just getting in touch with them and having the introductory conversation with the decision makers. There'll usually be somebody who is in a recruiter role or a development role. They might call themselves a director of development or franchise recruiter. That's the person who helps navigate you through the research process. So you're inquiring with them, they're probably going to send you a small profile of, tell us a little bit about your background and why you're interested. And until you send that in, they're probably not going to clamor to get back in touch with you. They want to understand that you're a serious candidate. Then they'll have an initial conversation with you, getting to know a little bit more about you and painting the big picture of what their business model looks like. What you'll see from that point forward is a couple of conversations with people in the national office, followed by sending you that big, fat, thick franchise disclosure document. We'll have a slide on it in a minute. Don't worry about that. And that's where the franchisor kind of pulls down their pants and says, hey, you're thinking about getting into business with us? Here's everything you want to know about us. The background of the people behind the business, the financials of the franchisor, contact information for all the existing local franchisees, and information about here's what we will and will not provide to you. Here's what you should expect to invest in the business in the beginning and ongoing. Yes, there are other ways to fast forward yourself through that process. There are franchise consultants and franchise brokers. Yes, that's what my franchise does. I'm a franchise consultant. And that might help expedite that process for you and learn a little bit more about research along the way. You can certainly pick up the phone or send an email and start that research process yourself. Did that answer the question for Chris?
I think so, yes. She does say thank you very much for the info. And then we have one other question coming in that has to do with credit. And so when it comes to financing, what's the acceptable credit score or debt to income range? And could home equity be used to start up instead of small business financing?
So I'll be the first one to answer part B of that and maybe defer to you, Mrs. SBA, about the question A. So question B, home equity or a HELOC, home equity line of credit, absolutely can. And I often see people utilizing that as, or other assets. Other things that I've seen people use recently are portfolio loans. If you have an overall portfolio of assets or holdings like stocks, you might work with your financial advisor and find a lender that's willing to do a portfolio loan for somebody. Certainly, most people will supplement either what they take out of a home equity loan or what they take out of another asset they may supplement it with lending, and that's where credit scores become important. So I'm going to defer to you, Mrs. SBA, Elizabeth, on the first part of that question.
Yeah, so credit obviously does come into play with the SBA because we are guaranteed loans programs through the bank, much like how the VA home loan works. We can be there for folks that have a little bit less of a down payment available, or perhaps a little lower of a credit score, or not as extensive business history, or whatever the case may be. So because we back the loans for the bank, that can make them more likely to lend to you if you don't have, say, the best credit, or things like that. And then of course there's always microloans if your credit is a little bit too low to even qualify for SBA guaranteed loans. And those are available through SBA Resource Partners as well. Hopefully that answers that.
I'll add one extra thing to that, because I'm a volunteer and run my own for-profit business, so I can open up a little bit more on. Over the last 6 or 12 months, I've worked with probably a dozen different people who've researched businesses in all different categories. And so a credit score, combined credit score of 680 or above is still the magic number. And if you're above 700, that gets you into that range where you're most likely to get the most favorable interest rates on a loan.
Awesome. And two, the SBA does not use the exact credit score from the credit bureaus too. We have a kind of a combination of factors that we use to create a score.
Thanks for that clarification. What I'd also tell you, if you were just going through a different kind of loan, a conventional loan that didn't require an SBA guarantee, you're typically going to find those same thresholds to be the case, the 680 and above 700. Mm-hmm. Before I start talking about these other slides, other general questions that we should throw into the mix right now from the attendees, Elizabeth?
It looks like we have answered everything thus far. So if anybody does have any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat box and we will get them answered for you.
Gotcha. And in a couple minutes after I finish my set of slides and we turn over to you, Elizabeth, I'll search through, and if I see anything that I think we should reemphasize, I'll be sure to address that, guys. So now, of course, I've had on the screen the slide that we had intended to spend the majority of our call on, in the title slide, COVID-resistant, boy, I cannot say this one cleanly, COVID-resistant and recession-resistant franchises include. So certainly I would say over time, as I've been in the franchising field for 20 plus years, most of these categories I would always have thrown into the recession-resistant category. But what I've seen over the last 8 months is they also seem to be very much COVID resistant. So home healthcare, residential repairs, home improvement, janitorial disinfecting, sign making businesses, virtual services or technology. These are all businesses, at least within the franchising field that I work with every day. These are all businesses, that are having record years. Things to consider. Why is that? Well, think about it. Every time we walk into a Hy-Vee or a Home Depot or any store right now, there's lots of new signs, and they change just about every week, don't they? Because of social distancing, because of new guidelines. And it doesn't look like there's any end in sight to that right now. Well, somebody had to sell all those signs, right? And typically those sign making businesses do a whole lot more than just those little signs that we're seeing a lot right now. So if there's a new school going up, they might do the lettering on that. If there's new municipal buildings, they might do the signage on that, all those types of things. I've got an elementary school student and a high school student right now. Virtual education, yeah, it's at a premium right now. And in some cases, parents are looking for things that will actually supplement or complement what's going on in their schools right now. And of course, no more snow days. So virtual school isn't going away. I don't know, my kids are in Omaha public schools, and got that wonderful news, right? Snow days don't really exist anymore, because now if there's a snow day, it just goes virtual. Talk about one final gut punch that coronavirus brought to all of us.
That's just wrong.
Just wrong. Lots of people are stuck at home with extra time. So they're seeing all the home improvement projects that they wanted to get to. And some of those home improvement projects are the things that, well, maybe it's my wife saying to me, oh, you're not doing that one on your own. We're going to end up 10 times more into this if I let you start that project. Home improvement companies of all types, whether they're bathroom remodeling or resurfacing of driveways or whatever. They're all having record years, at least what I'm seeing. Of course, yes, all businesses need sanitizing and disinfection at a whole new level right now, and they're required to have such on a regular basis. Employers are outsourcing more. Internet downtime is devastating to businesses right now. So anybody that's in managed services or helping with virtual components of running businesses from 9,000 guest rooms and family rooms, those are incredibly important. So yeah, many of these businesses thrive in all economic conditions, and there are a lot in the franchising field that are having big years. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty in the franchising industry that are really struggling right now. Yes, there's lots of franchises locally and nationally that are experiencing the same closings, sadly, of locations that probably will never open. Restaurants, event centers, anything related to travel, franchise or not, they're having tough years. Hospitality, some of them are surviving better. Some of them have a few more resources than maybe the locally owned and operated locations because of the support of their franchise systems. But there are definitely franchises that are having tough years. And these that we're listing on these past few slides are some of the exceptions. We have some veterans or active service and or spouses of active service on the call. Here's some interesting slides that we talk about in those office sessions that Elizabeth and I do and are now doing virtually, by the way. Anybody guess for me, one in how many franchises across the United States? So the locally owned and operated franchises, add up all the FranNets, add up all the Runzas, add up all the McDonald's. One in how many are owned by veterans? Got any answers yet?
And I'm hearing one in 4 and 10.
Well, split the difference. You guys are brilliant together. 1 in 7. I was just looking at some new data on that earlier this week, interestingly. 13%, I believe, I'm not a mathematician, but 13 to 14%, literally, of all locally owned and operated franchises across the United States are owned and operated by veterans or veteran spouses of veterans. 66,000 veteran-owned franchises, and actually that's 2014 numbers, so it's higher than that in the US. So they have a massive economic impact. Why is that? Of course, that's much higher than the percentage of veterans in the local community as part of our overall population. Here's why. Top performing franchisees need this, and I see this in my own franchise system: outstanding leadership and teamwork skills, ability to implement and execute systems, have a team of peers and common mission and goals, accept ongoing business training and support. You've got to have those things in place to be really successful within a franchise system. Well, guess what all that sounds like, right? All sounds like the kind of training and kind of skills that are at a premium in military service. So franchisors have certainly recognized for decades the value that military service experience brings to an owner of a local franchise. And as a result, franchisors actively encourage and provide incentives in many cases for folks with military backgrounds, veterans, to join their franchise system. There's a whole program developed by the franchise industry itself, and it's bolted on to the big industry trade association called the International Franchise Association. So VetFran is something, if you go out to vetfran.org, and Google that, you'll see that it's part of the International Franchise Association. That's the trade association. It was founded in '91 for veterans transitioning after the first Gulf. And there are now about 600, and I think it was 630 different franchise systems out there who opt into this program and choose to participate in this program, which ultimately offers financial incentives. It'll include things like discounts on those initial franchise fees. So when I joined FranNet, my initial franchise fee was pretty typical, pretty average within the franchising industry, about $30,000. That's pretty average. Usually goes between $30,000 and $50,000 is the initial joining fee to get access to the ongoing proprietary tools as long as you're in that franchise system. And in many cases, folks through the VetFran program who join with military service experience may get a discount of anywhere from 10 to 50% on that initial franchise fee. There's also additional training and mentoring. So other veterans who are already franchise owners may have volunteered to provide additional mentoring above and beyond what new franchise owners get within that particular franchise system. And that oftentimes is even more valuable than the discounts on the initial franchise fees. Because sometimes those are conversations about not just how to succeed within this franchise system, but how do I adapt to the civilian world? If it's somebody who retired after 30 years in the military and has never operated outside of the military world. So I mentioned the investment costs. Well, here's the good news. No, you don't have to be a millionaire to join franchises. Before I got into the franchising field, honestly, I was one of those people, and I don't know if any of you were, but I thought, boy, you know, it'd be nice someday to be part of a franchise, but I don't have a war chest sitting around. My perspective on that was based on what I knew was franchising at the time. And it was, you know, McDonald's and Pizza Hut and big retail places, which my perception was, gosh, you must have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to get into that. That's true with some of those big brands I mentioned before, like Runza. I don't know of anybody that's gotten into a Runza for less than $1 million. So it's usually a partnership with people or somebody that's already pretty financially well off. But that's the minority of franchise owners. It's not typical. And I can tell you, currently myself working with about 250 different franchise opportunities, for somebody who's got that good credit, 680 and above, and they can come up with about $30,000 or more in liquid capital, it's going to qualify you to be able to research and invest in at least 100 different franchise opportunities that I can think of across a ton of different industries. And these are all franchise opportunities that have shown to offer a reliable path to creating and replacing a six-figure income. Never any guarantees as far as what you can take home as far as income for starting your own new business, including in franchising. But I can tell you that those I'm talking about here are ones that typically show a consistent path towards being able to generate that if you're at least an average performer within their franchise system. And yes, you can vet that out if you get far enough along in their research process by talking to those actual franchise owners and asking them questions like, how much money do you take home? And how long did it take you to get to that point? Average initial investment range, I'm not gonna go into all those details, but my point again is, yeah, there are, let me get fancy here. There are those that go into that 500,000 and above, but the lion's share are around this range, right? So anywhere, look at that perfect left-handed circle I just drew. Lion's share are going to be around that range. And the folks that I've helped get into franchising around this area, typically it's somewhere between $150,000 and $250,000 all in. Everything you're going to need to get the lights on, so to speak, and through the first 3 months of operating capital. So it's not free, it's not cheap. But what I would suggest people do, like I did, is I compared it to, well, what would my cost be to do the same thing on my own? What do they bring to the table? It may help me expedite my path to success, get to break even sooner, and enable me to ensure continued success and profitability in my business. And for me, I said, I think these guys, FranNet, can help me do it faster than I can do on my own. And so that was what tipped me in the direction of franchise ownership. Those groups that fall into that higher range, 500,000 and above, you can bet that over the years, they've commissioned all kinds of studies to try to find some correlation between, hey, if you invest more, then there's a correlation between that and the potential return. I've never in 21 years in the field, nor have I heard from anybody else in the field, seen that there's a direct correlation that says, if you invest more in a franchise, you have a higher potential return. So that's the good news. If you're investing down at this lower range, there's just as good a chance that you could someday take away a six-figure income as if you invest up here. That's industry data by studies often commissioned from those folks in the higher investment range. So we're gonna we're going to do 2 more quick slides as a transition to Elizabeth. And I think between we'll field more questions so that we can hopefully focus more on the stuff that you guys really want to know. How to finance it. We talked a little bit because of the great question earlier. How do you finance a small business franchise? Or I would argue that this is true for any kind of business that you start. Typically, those financing resources, I guess I can't get my drawing off of any of the screens now. That's the limit to my knowledge of Zoom. Personal savings, friends, relatives, or a business partner, home equity line of credit, as we were talking about before, seller financing, resale. This is typically, it often is all coupled with borrowing from a lender, whether that ends up being a conventional loan that doesn't involve the SBA, or more often than not, does involve an SBA-backed lender, which Elizabeth will talk more about. There are many different options to put together those financing sources. It's not just, well, I got to have cash in my pocket and then I got to get a loan from the bank. So there are options out there. And the good news in franchising is the doors tend to be open a little bit wider to financing options, because lenders and others like the idea of working with proven franchise systems that have shown a track record of success. So this here is, how do I come up with the liquid capital that I'm going to need to get this thing started and to keep feeding it? But as I said before, that is typically supplemented with another chunk of money, and that is what you borrow from somebody else to cover the rest of the operating costs and the rest of what you need to put into it. So let's say you're looking at a franchise opportunity that's going to be an all-in investment, the whole project cost, everything you're going to need to get this thing up and going and to keep feeding it until it gets profitable. Let's say it's 100 grand. Expect, by traditional lending terms, which have stuck pretty consistent over the last few decades, you're going to have to bring about 25 to 30% of that money to the table. You're going to have to bring $25,000 to $30,000 to the table. Oops. And that's what you bring through these items here. The other 70 to 75%, most people are getting through a lender or somebody who's lending them the money. That is where the SBA comes in. And I'm going to try this one more time and see if I can clear what I noted here before we turn it over to Elizabeth. Oh, can't get it off.
Like your artwork.
I'll keep messing with it, Elizabeth, but let's just go to, while I'm doing the mindless job of erasing this, other questions that we might be able to field before we transition into your slides.
I have not seen anything else come through the chat box. So if you do have one, by all means, please put it in there. I actually did have a question, though, back when you were talking about how a lot of businesses were either doing well during COVID or were struggling. If you're in a franchise, how much flexibility do you have to pivot what you offer? Because we keep hearing all the time that the businesses that are surviving are pivoting. Do you still have that same flexibility?
You know, that's a really interesting question. I'm glad it was posed because I may not have covered that. So the short answer is yes. When there are major upheavals in a local, state, or federal economy, my experience over the last 5 or 6 downturns since I got into this business in the early 90s is franchisors will help their franchisees pivot, adapt, or respond. Now, that's with the backdrop of, yes, in normal times, there are typically those guide rails, right? There are requirements and guidelines, and franchisors will say, well, I don't care if you think you can make money selling pizza out of the Runza window. We still need to, at a minimum, be involved in it and approve it before we let you do that. But going back to the initial question, let me give you some examples. So like in the food field, some folks that I know who own the 2 local Vitality Bowls locations, their franchisor stepped in and immediately helped other local franchisees and actually covered the cost for all the local franchisees around the country of, if they weren't already actively participating with the app that allowed customers to order and blasting all of their current and former customers with information about how to order through the app, and weren't helping their franchise owners with getting curbside service going. That's what they spent lots of their time doing. So what I witnessed, particularly in March and April, was a lot of franchisors who were not only helping them adapt, pivot, whatever term you want to use, to the new reality, but also good franchise systems out there were holding webinars and helping franchisees and taking all the people that were normally working on their development team because they stopped selling new franchises and instead repurpose those people to help their franchisees fill out and get educated on things like their PPP applications or their EIDL applications. That's what good franchise systems were doing. Let's help you adapt to this new reality, figure out how we're going to weather this storm. And if we need to change things, lots of fitness businesses who put together the channel and set up Zoom accounts for their franchisees so that they could do virtual training. Did those local franchisees still lose revenue because people weren't coming in their doors? Yeah, but in many cases, they retained their members and people didn't cancel memberships because they at least had the opportunity to do online fitness versus no opportunity at all. And those franchises that helped their franchisees pivot more quickly just because they had more resources, they had more people and more money to be able to do that, in many cases did help their franchisees weather the storm better than those who didn't have a franchise or to work with.
Awesome.
That is a great question.
Any other questions? Feel free to unmute or put them in there before we move just really briefly here into a little bit on financing.
When you're dealing with boots to business, do you find that many of the veterans are looking to get out of the larger communities and into the rural communities?
So I guess we could both respond to that, Elizabeth and I both. The short answer is yes. So typically these are done at different military installations. We do them at Offutt, but they're done at military installations all over the country. And I would say off the top of my head, I'd say typically a good half to 2/3 of the people that are in those sessions intend on going back to some other location where they were stationed or to their hometown or to their home state. And oftentimes that's a more rural area than Metro Omaha or Metro Des Moines or Kansas City. What are your thoughts on that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a lot of folks, are going back to other states. The ones I've talked to here, there's been a couple that have wanted to go back here in Nebraska and go rural and maybe start some farmsteads or like a vineyard, those types of businesses. Or rural event planning, talk to somebody who wanted to do that, like a barn type of venue for weddings, those types of things out in rural Nebraska. So yeah, good question.
Popular this year.
Yeah, seriously. The bigger the barn, the better, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'll turn it over to you for the last few slides of this. And just as a point of information, folks, I know that we've scheduled this to stop at the top of the hour, which is in 10 minutes. I am more than happy to stick on this for at least 15 minutes past the hour for anybody that does have additional questions.
Yeah, me too. Okay, well, I will be awesome. Thank you. And I will be super brief. So just wanted to start by saying what the SBA's mission is. Just in a nutshell, we are the only federal resource that's solely dedicated to helping you start, grow, expand, and recover your small business. And then we can get you in contact with resource partners who can give you free assistance. We can help you figure out how to get into federal contracting, those types of things. And then especially, most importantly, now we have a disaster loan program that can help you recover from either physical disasters or, as we've seen this year, of course, recovering from the pandemic. So if any of you have questions about the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan and how you can use it for, if you currently own a small business or you know somebody who does, feel free to ask me those questions and we can talk about that offline too. Next slide, please. And of course, since this is National Veterans Small Business Week, I just wanted to highlight our website where you can go to get lots of information for veterans from the SBA. There's a lot of different resources on there. I'll talk about Boots to Business, some free veteran entrepreneurial educational opportunities that are available, and just a lot of great information there. And it also, if you're going into federal contracting, it also explains how the Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business Program works for federal contracting set-asides. So definitely check that out when you have some time. And next. We have two flagship loan programs, the 7A program and the 504 loan program. Both of these go up to $5 million. And the thing to keep in mind about our loans are that except for disaster loans, we do not directly loan money to you as a borrower. All of our normal business loans are done through the bank. So we back the loan through the bank, but it is actually a direct bank loan to you. And you can use our loans for almost any legitimate business purpose. You can buy a franchise with them. You can buy equipment, working capital, inventory. You can do, buy real estate, do renovations, all those types of things with our loan programs.
Hey, Elizabeth, real quick. So
yeah,
the banks participate with SBA, and that's how the SBA loans happen. Are there local banks around here that participate with SBA?
Yes, actually, every single bank in the U.S. and U.S. territories can participate in the SBA or can participate in the SBA loan program. We've found not all of them will for various reasons. So what you can do when you go to seek financing is ask to talk to the SBA loan officer. Typically, especially your larger banks will have one of their loan officers that's dedicated specifically to SBA loans. And they can really help you, but any bank can do an SBA guaranteed loan, and there's tons of them. Basically, all your banks around here, in Omaha do, definitely. So great question. And just to hit the veteran aspect of this, our SBA Express loan normally goes up to $350,000. Because of COVID, that limit has gone up to $1 million, and that's going to be the case through the end of December here. But the special thing to keep in mind about this loan is that there's no guarantee fee for veterans. And that's typically 2 to 3.5% of the guaranteed portion of the loan. That has now been permanently waived for veterans, which is awesome news. So that's some great savings for you if you're going to be pursuing this loan. So normally up to $350,000. And this is a quicker loan, for lack of a better word, because you're going to certain designated banks that are SBA Express lenders, so they can use their own kind of collateral requirements or programs, application forms. So it's a much faster loan than going through, say, a 7A or a 504. So that's a really good option for folks. And various information on there. Couple reasons to use the SBA guaranteed loan program for lenders: because we guarantee the loan for the bank, it makes them a lot more willing to loan to small business owners, again, that might not have the best financial background, because it mitigates the risk. They like to use us really just because we can guarantee up to 50 to 90% of the loan, depending on which program that you're using, which is awesome for the banks. And it's good for you because it can help you get that access to capital that you may not be able to get otherwise. And if you don't have a lot for down payment, or you don't have a lot of collateral, that can be kind of a big stumbling block a lot of times for new business owners, especially younger business owners who may not own a home or may not have the assets to put up for collateral. So we have more lenient collateral requirements for that. As I said, every bank can do business with us, and our interest rates are capped, which is a good thing for you as a borrower. And then our rules also say that banks cannot do balloon payments or demand features on any of our loans, which is also very beneficial to you as well. Lender Match has been around for, a little over a year now, and this is just a great way for you to be able to get in touch with banks without having to actually leave your house. You just go to that website, create an account, enter a bit of information about your business, not your whole business plan, just enough to kind of tell banks what you want to do, and then that gets shot out to all of the participating lenders, and then they will contact you if they're interested in working with you. So I call it the lazy way to get to the bank. If you don't want to leave the house, which is very handy right now, not having to leave your house. And next slide. So that was it in a nutshell. I promised Blake I would be fast, super brief. So if you do have any,
I was.
I know. I sound like a chipmunk on Red Bull too. I'm very highly caffeinated. So sorry if I'm talking too fast. Yeah, so there's my contact information. If you have any questions about our loan programs, by all means, do contact me. And I do see one question from Kristen here, who is, so she's asking about, she's a highly skilled at phlebotomy and lab testing and can provide assistance with COVID-19. And she wants to open up her own testing center, but is not sure how to go about doing this. That is an excellent question. I actually, you know what, probably a really good resource for you for that would be to talk to DHS, the Health and Human Services Department. They might know, because I'm sure there's a lot of really specific requirements that you have to have from the state in order to be able to do that. But as long as it's a for-profit business, you know, that would be viable for the SBA to work with you on financing for that. But that's a great question.
I'll add something to that too. So if it's a question more about the viability and market feasibility of that business in general, I would suggest, franchised or not, find out who is doing something similar or the same, even if you have to go outside of this market to identify who that is, and shop them or build a relationship with them and talk to the decision makers in the organization. You know, find out more about the industry from people who are in the industry. And there are ways to do that. Of course, in the franchising field, like I was explaining before, that's kind of part of the process, but it doesn't mean that you can't do that outside of the franchising field as well. I'm gonna stop the share here real quick and just make sure that I'm not seeing any questions that you wouldn't be seeing, Elizabeth. Nope, nothing right now. Other questions? In understanding that our assumption on these calls is that this is the first time anybody's been in a conversation like this when it comes to franchises. So there's literally no such thing as a dumb question right now. It's the first time you've probably ever asked that question.
And Blake loves tricky technical questions involving math. So if you've got one of those, by all means.
I will go back to one item that I sped over a little bit in this session because it came up in a question as we're wrapping up here and seeing if we have any more questions come in. The franchise disclosure document, when I was talking about components of the research process, that's a really important piece. So if you want to sound really smart when you're talking to a franchise company and initiating a research, ask them about their FDD, the franchise disclosure document. What that is a document that any franchise who wants to sell even one franchise location anywhere in the country has to file this initially and every year in the spring, March, April, May, with the Federal Trade Commission. And that's that document that provides you a whole host of information about the organization itself and the background of the organization. If they choose to disclose the financials, so the revenues that are generated from their average locations, they're required to disclose, here's what the costs will be to build a business like this based upon what we've actually seen with real numbers with our existing franchise owners, the financials of the franchise organization, as well as the rules of engagement, what you can and can't do. So going back to, you know, how adaptable will this model be if times change, and what does their franchise agreement say about what I can and can't do and what they will and won't help me with as an owner? Because you are, in almost every single case, when you become a franchise owner, you own 100% of that small business. Point I want to emphasize, because I do have people who come to me and say, well, if I'm not going to own the thing, why should I be in a franchise? If you own your local small business franchise, you almost always own 100% of that business. They own the brand and the rights to the brand, but you own that LLC or that S Corp or that small business entity that's running your business in your town. So that disclosure document will typically come to you at the second or third step of research, and they're required to send that to you 14 days at a minimum before you could ever sign anything or pay any money to a franchisor saying, I want to join and get in business. So with that, do we have any final questions that have come in before we wrap up at the top of the hour here? You can see our contact information on the screen. Again, this will be recorded and posted. You can simply reach out. Probably the easiest way to get the recorded information will be to go through Elizabeth Yearwood here at this email address and this phone number at the local SBA office, which happens to be on 108th and Maple in Omaha. But of course, the office isn't open right now. We appreciate all of you joining us today. If there are additional questions that we can answer for you, feel free to reach out to us. We will send a link to this recording to all of you who registered for the session. We wish you all the best of luck, and we hope you stay healthy, and best of luck in your endeavors as you move forward into business opportunities. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody to joining us today.
Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Thank you, Elizabeth.
You bet.